get started so that we can really spread this out widely. And you're welcome to share in the chat where you're calling in from. So we'll get started in just a minute or so.
Лариса Вильевна, приветствуем. Как звук? Larissa Shessler is in
да, я все слышу и вижу. Спасибо.
Сейчас, наверное, стоит обсудить, какая будет, ну, как регламент будет.
Уже это обсудили, Леонид. Ты опоздал, уже это обсудили. Leonid said that he would like to just go through the program of our meeting, but I replied to him that you were late, Leonid, because Joe has already explained. It's not necessary to lose time.
No, we can start, of course. Question is on who is going first. Will you invite the speakers, Joe, by some number of?
Yes, so we're going to wait 2 minutes and then start.
Yeah,
and Larissa, hello, I'm glad to meet you. How are you?
Leonid, and the program of our meeting has been already advertised and sent via internet. So look through, that's it.
Hey, Joe.
Very easy.
Joe, a suggestion here. I don't know if Vladimir would be willing, but Leonid's voice cuts out from time to time. And I wonder if we have trouble with hearing his translation of Larissa, maybe Vladimir would be willing to translate Larissa's words. Anyway, I think no, you wouldn't.
Is going to read her statement in English, I understand.
Larissa should be prepared to speak English.
She's going to read it in English.
Oh, she is, okay, all right. Good.
All right, we'll give it 1 minute and we'll start, folks. All right, well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Feel free to put in the chat where you're from. I'd urge while we are speaking, however, is to not write any big treaties or anything, is to listen to the speakers. I think this is a great opportunity for us in the United States, for the peace movement in the United States, to speak to our friends and comrades and colleagues from Russia and Ukraine, and to let us come to a common agreement that we are against war, that we do not want to see the saber rattling that we're seeing on the part of the United States continue. So we will go back and forth with one of us speaking and one of them speaking, and then we will have a question and answer period, which you are all welcome to participate in. The best way to do that is to go to the question and answer icon on the bottom of your screens and put in a question or answer, because if you put it in the chat, it will just get lost. So I'd urge you to do it from the question and answer icon on the screen. Before we start with our other speakers, I'm going to introduce Margaret Flowers, who many from the United States I'm sure know. Margaret is the director of Popular Resistance, which is also a member group of UNAC, and she is on the UNAC Administrative Committee. And as many of you know, yesterday we had a day of protests throughout the United States against war. And Margaret's going to report on that and a statement that we came together on in an online rally that happened. And Margaret, take the floor.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe, for inviting me to give a quick report. And thank you to our guests from Russia and Ukraine for being willing to spend time with us today. It's so important to hear from you. About a week and a half ago, 12 major national and international peace anti-war organizations in the United States came together and crafted a call to action and put that out. I guess it was actually just a week ago today that call to action went out, and very quickly people mobilized around the country. Action started actually that next day on Monday. People were in front of the White House in Washington, D.C., and several actions throughout the week. But yesterday was the major day where we had about 70 cities in more than 26 states. People came out. There were strong presences in New York City and Washington, D.C., but it really was all the way from Honolulu, Hawaii, north, south, east, and west in the United States. And so that was a very powerful day. In addition to the 12 major peace anti-war organizations signing on to the call to action, we had about 200 smaller groups that signed on, as well as about 900 people who signed a petition to the president. And our demands are to stop the war with Russia, stop the NATO expansion, stop sending weapons to Ukraine and the European Union, obey international laws and the United Nations Charter, resolve the current conflict appropriately within the UN Security Council, and de-escalate the threat of nuclear war. So we are united about no war with Russia. We are united about protecting the sovereignty of Ukraine and respecting that. We're united that our focus in the United States is our government, and that we have to hold our government accountable for its violations of international law. So actions are continuing to be organized. They'll be continuing through this coming week as well. So if you go to popularresistance.org, you can read the call to action and find the list of actions there and sign the petition. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Can people hear me there? I think my voice is I'm Joe Lombardo. I am, you can hear me, right? Other participants? Okay, I'm Joe Lombardo. I am the coordinator of United National Antiwar Coalition, which is a coalition in the United States made up of around 100 national, regional, and local organizations. We put together this webinar today because we thought it was important that voices from the United States, but also from Russia and Ukraine, are heard in the United States. We know that the propaganda in the United States is very thick, and you don't hear anything other than the State Department's position on what is happening in Ukraine and on the Russian border now. When the media reports it in the United States, they usually say it's happening on the Ukraine border, not the Russian border. They don't mention that there are the troops on Russia, and this is what they consider aggressive. We have just in the United States come out of a war, a 20-year war with Afghanistan, and in a matter of months, again, we see the saber rattling, and this time against a major nuclear power, a very grave situation that requires all of us to put all of our efforts into stopping. Now, we are hearing in the United States from the media that there are 100,000 Russian troops on the border, on the Russian border, in Russian territory, but they don't say that. They usually say the Ukraine border. They say this is an aggressive stance and that it's going to lead to an invasion of Ukraine. Russia has denied that they have any intention of invading Ukraine. This is what they call aggression. When the troops are on the Russian side of the border, that's aggression. However, there are 300,000 US troops throughout Europe. There are around 150,000 Ukrainian troops with US advisors and modern US weapons, including recently they've received some Predator drones, weaponized drones that they have used against some of the areas in Donbass. So there are 150,000 Ukrainian troops with US advisors in and around Donbass, that is on the Russian border. But that is not said in the media. And the 300,000 troops and the new mobilizations of troops going to the area from the United States, they consider this not aggressive. This is defensive. The United States made a promise in 1990 when the Soviet Union was collapsing, that it would not move any of NATO forces, that it would not move NATO into any country east of Germany. That is, it would not put NATO into any of the former Warsaw Pact countries, which were the allies of the Soviet Union, or into any of the former Soviet states. However, to date, they have put it in 14 of these in violation of that agreement. We know the United States is not very good on agreements. They just violated the agreement with Iran, unilaterally withdrew from that. They violated and unilaterally withdrew from some of the nuclear proliferation agreements. They have missiles in these NATO countries right on the border with Russia. They have conducted what they call war games right on the border with Russia. And when Russia puts its troops on the other side of the border, on its side of these war games, the US claims that's aggressive, not these war games. So it's a very dangerous situation, and the actual aggression is on the side of the United States, which in the last couple of decades, last few decades, has been in one war after the other, one invasion and one occupation after another, many of them based on false flag type situations. Such as when we said there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which there were not, which led to a war with that country, which may have killed 1.5 million people. There's very little difference between what the United States is doing on the border of Russia and what we saw as the Cuban Missile Crisis years ago, where there was the idea that Cuba would get some missiles to protect itself from invasions from the United States, and there had been invasions from the United States at the Bay of Pigs and other aggressive actions towards Cuba. But the US was prepared to go to war, World War III, a nuclear war over this. But it is okay for the United States to do the same thing towards Russia. Well, it should not be okay, and it is not okay with us. Now, I know Bruce is going to talk a little bit, Bruce Gagnon, about Ukraine, because he's been there a couple of times, as have I. I was there last in 2019. I was in Odessa to support the Odessans who are holding a memorial for the people who were killed by fascists after the coup that took place in 2014. And it is very clear what kind of government exists in the Ukraine right now. There's an extreme right-wing government with real fascist factions that are part of the government. The hammer and sickle is banned in Ukraine, but the swastika is not. And you could see swastikas drawn on the walls. You can see them drawn on the sidewalks. You can see them on people's jackets. I was there for one of the torchlight marches of the extreme fascists. Their main slogan they were chanting as they marched down the street was "Hang the Russians from the trees." Our group, the group of thousands and thousands of people from Odessa who came to support this memorial that was being threatened by these fascists that came in from around the country to oppose it, were not allowed to have a sound system. We're not allowed for even the mothers of the people that were killed to speak through a sound system. The police stopped them. Yet when the fascists marched to the center of Odessa, they were allowed to have a sound system and they were allowed to speak. So there's a very dangerous situation. Ukraine has the longest border with Russia of any European country. And there are right-wing and fascist organizations that are part of the government that have free reign in Ukraine. The Soviet Union lost more than 20 million people defeating the Nazis and do not want to see it again. So when they make a demand that Ukraine not become part of NATO and that the 14 areas, the 14 countries that were promised not to become part of NATO be withdrawn, they are right on the Russian border. There's a reason for this. And there's a reason for the Russians to want to have forces to make sure that their country is safe. These are a defensive action on their part. So I'm going to stop there. Other folks are going to speak. I'm going to call on our next speaker, who is Leonid Ilderkin. I hope I got that right, Leonid. Leonid is someone I speak to regularly. He organizes a group in Russia called the Red Square Club, which I am on periodically, and others throughout Europe and the United States and Russia come on, where we have discussions. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Leonid, and he'll make a presentation. After he does and the others do, we'll have questions and answers, and then we'll end with closing statements. Leonid, the floor is yours.
Dear friends, thank you very much. First of all, I want to express our gratitude from not only myself personally, but also from the Union of Political Emigrants and Political Prisoners of Ukraine, which I am from. And to be short, to try to make the speech concise into the frame which is given to us, we need to understand the situation in Ukraine in the context of the capitalism development in general. Capitalism has such a nature that demands profit, otherwise it doesn't exist. Profit comes largely in the case of in case of international relations, it comes from the military-industrial complex, profit of budgets which comes from states, and the nature of the Ukrainian conflict comes into this concept largely. There must be some type of disturbance on earth somewhere in order for military-industrial complex to gain profit, whether it is from USA or from another countries like European Union, like this union of countries, or UK. This is one reason. Another reason is the shortage of market in the world. For instance, when it comes to the crisis of consumption, when people start to consume less, market becomes smaller. And there are, so to say, producers who must be driven out from there. So happened with Ukraine. Ukraine, before the coup d'etat in 2014, had very cheap products of metal and agriculture. It must have been driven out from the market largely. That is why it must have been destroyed by the law of capitalist, so to say, competition. since it was weak military-wise, since it was politically not very stable, it was easy target for those who wanted to kill its industry, kill its agriculture, and drive it away from the market as well. Keep it somewhere outside of the market. That had happened largely about Ukraine. Now, what is going on? We have information coming to us every day almost, because although we are in exile, but we keep our hands and we keep our connections there in Ukraine. We know very much how much people struggling there and how much discontent is present in the Ukrainian society about everything. Take everything. The conditions in the cities, much worse conditions in the villages, decline of industry uncomparable, as if devastating war already happened. Although it is not in the war situation, but the losses of Ukraine from the time of collapse of Soviet Union from 1991, the losses of Ukraine are very much amazing. We could have imagined such losses. And this is only because of the economy of capitalism and the situation of the world market, so to say. Ukraine is out of it now. And it is now becoming a disputable territory between somebody who is more powerful. And since we understand the situation of today as the situation when USA most likely, and it is only our estimation, USA is trying to withdraw from another very remote places on earth, like it did from Afghanistan, can be the situation when it is, it will not have hand in Ukraine, but it will be replaced by the hands of English influence. Maybe it is not very good in English, this expression. English influence now becomes more and more in Ukraine, and together with this Turkish influence. You could see that the Prime Minister of England recently visited Kyiv. About 2 days ago, a Turkish, whoever is he, Prime Minister or President Erdogan, did visit Kyiv and had agreement of free trade zone there with Ukraine, which gives to Turkey great benefit and also kills Ukrainian economy, because Turkey has much cheaper product than Ukrainian producers. So what we can say, as an estimation, that is, maybe we are wrong very much, that both England and Turkey now having their hands heavily on Ukraine, it comes together with the English plan to make a union of 3 countries, which is UK, Poland, and Ukraine, to cut European peninsula from Baltic to Black Sea from the rest of Eurasian continent. Do not let Chinese plan of what is called Silk Way, which means railroads and roads from China stretched across the continent into the Western Europe. So they don't want to make it. They don't want to have it. And even small provocation, well, heavy enough provocation can cause now, today, when the tensions so much raised, the small provocation, which can be another bombing or chemical weapon attack, can make response from the side of Russia in some airstrike in response. This will make all of the consequences of the plan to separate Russia from the European Union completely. And we estimate that that there is not not only even plan, but even desire for of Russian elites to try to hold Ukraine. They want to have it neutralized, neutral, like Austria, like Finland. But what can happen for now, we cannot predict very well. Most likely, there will come some provocation from Ukrainian side, even to a degree of attempt of strike against Donetsk and Lugansk. This strike will have response from Russian territory as an air strike. This can separate Russia from European Union for a long time. And this Russian don't want very much. They try to avoid this scenario by all means. This is what my personal estimation, and so with others. Thank you very much, dear friends.
Thank you, Leonid. Just so people know, there are a lot of Ukrainians in Russia right now as refugees because of the right-wing government that is in Ukraine. When I was there in 2019, the woman that organized our trip there, her name was put on a fascist website, and she was not able to be with us in Odessa, even though she is Ukrainian and lives in Ukraine. She had to leave the country because people on that website typically got disappeared, got beaten up, got jailed, or they had to leave the country, or they would leave the country, which many have. So there are refugees in places like Russia from Ukraine. But this is the kind of democracy that the United States is building in Ukraine. Our next speaker is Bruce Gagnon. Bruce is the coordinator of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. He's a longtime anti-war activist. His organization is a member of UNAC, and he has been a number of times to Ukraine and also to Russia. So I'm giving the floor to Bruce Gagnon.
Thank you, Joe. And I'm just want to start out by saying how beautiful it is to see how many people are on this call and from all over the world. It's really, really wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this. Leonid, who just spoke, was my guide in 2019 and took me to the Donbass, to the cities of Donetsk and Lugansk. It was an amazing trip. And the thing that stands out in my mind most of all was being in those cities and seeing apartment blocks or apartment buildings that were empty now because they were shelled by these Nazis and Ukrainian forces on the other side of what's called the line of contact, just on the other side of the Russian-Ukraine border. And as Joe said earlier, there are about 150,000 Ukrainian forces there now, US, Canadian, various NATO advisors, mercenaries that are brought in from the Syria war that the US has been sponsoring. All kinds of different people like that are now lined up, ready to attack the Donbass, as Leonid just said. So that was a really amazing experience for me. I want to remind everybody that it was Bill Clinton, when he was president, that began this NATO expansion, or as he called it, NATO enhancement, violating the promises that were made at the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, that NATO would not expand towards Russia. And so basically, Russia's perspective, it appears to me, is that you really can't trust promises made by the United States today when it comes to negotiations. Also, we just learned days ago that there are 15 Iranian nuclear power plants Ukrainian nuclear power plants. So if there was a full-blown war inside of Ukraine, imagine what could happen, you know, accidentally or otherwise, with those nuclear power plants. That's frightening. And that would, you know, contamination from those could be carried by the winds globally. It's just absolutely insane what the United States and NATO are doing today. You know, talking about a Cuban Missile Crisis in reverse, in Romania and Poland, the United States has established launch facilities that can fire nuclear capable first strike attack cruise missiles into Russia to hit their command control centers, to hit their underground nuclear bunkers, hit their military bases, hit various other targets. Very dangerous. Nobody ever talks about that in the Western media. You never ever hear that. This is a clear provocation and something that we in the peace movement should be talking about quite frequently. We also hear a lot about from the Western media how Russia wants to recreate the former Soviet Union, wants to grab back Eastern Europe under their control. Well, this is another one of the big lies. And the way to prove that is such a lie is just looking at the numbers. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI it's called, every year looks at global military spending. And Russia is spending about $65 billion a year, while the US is spending $1.2 billion. When you add up all the various pots of gold where the Pentagon hides its military money, it comes to about 1.2 billion a year. You add the NATO numbers into that, and it's well over 60% of the global total. Yeah, did I say 1.2 billion? It's 1.2 trillion. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you for that correction, folks. 1.2 trillion. So clearly, you add up the US and NATO figures, there's no way, and I don't believe Russia even wants to do that, but there's no way that they could possibly do that with that small amount of money. In the chat, I put a link to a Rand Corporation study that calls for the unbalancing of Russia, basically regime change in Moscow. Rand Corporation famously did the Pentagon paper study that was released by Daniel Ellsberg during the Vietnam War, the secret history of the war in Vietnam. And so now they're one of many who are calling for regime change in Moscow. What kind of arrogance is that? What kind of instability does that kind of threat create? So please take a look at that that study by the Rand Corporation in the link. We've got to do all we can. Yesterday, we had a protest here in 22-degree weather in Maine. There was another one protest in Topsom, Maine, another one on a bridge in Ellsworth, much farther north by people. So we're doing our bit here and urge people to stay active, stay out on the street, and keep spreading information, particularly that really well done documentary. I also put that in the chat, done by Oliver Stone, called Ukraine on Fire. It's really important. It really tells the whole story. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bruce. I'd like to urge people in the chat to listen to the speakers, you know, especially on off-topic subjects. And if there's any provocative stuff, I will ask the people to leave, or I will take them out, or if we have to, we'll stop the chat. So please use the chat responsibly and listen to the speakers. This is an opportunity that we don't often have to speak with people from Russia and Ukraine, as well as anti-war activists from the United States. I'm also going to put into the chat something that was sent to me by some of our European friends that were against the coup in Maidan that took place in 2014, about the rise of fascism in Ukraine. It's a very good video that they put together, and I will put that into the chat in a few minutes. But at this point, I'm going to introduce Vladimir Kozin. Kozin. I hope I say these names right.
Correct. Correct.
He is a correspondent member of the Russian Academy of Military Science and has been speaking at a number of forums and meetings on the situation that's going on now. And so here is Vladimir Kozin, Professor Kozin.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. And I'm also very grateful that such a huge audience, 285 people are watching us. So this tremendous amount, if I'm correct. I would like to make some bullet points on a number of issues. First of all, assessment of the situation. Second, the aims of US/NATO in Ukraine and against the Russian Federation. Third, violations of several international agreements and bilateral agreements as well in fostering a wide-scale aggression of Ukraine against Donbass. And finally, at the end of my remarks, I would tell you what Russian officials are thinking about a chance to wage an all-out war against Ukraine, and what we shall do if Ukraine attacks Donbass. So the situation, I share view of Joe that the situation is very tense and dangerous, and it creates a kind of alarm and a kind of anxiety and threat and gloomy scenarios have been already tabled using conventional and nuclear weapons. That's quite a possibility, and God forbid this never happen at all. We have already counted more than 15 huge cargo or transport plane that came to Kiev's Boryspil International Airport and to Lviv or Lvov in ancient language. It's a western part of Ukraine, and 45 more are going to come to Ukraine with US, NATO military aid, bringing weaponry and ammunition to very big quantities. So unfortunately, it's a gross violation of the international ATT or Arms Trade Treaty. Its Article 6 prohibits to deliver military hardware, military equipment, and military attack systems to areas that might be used against civilian targets and civilian population. As to Donbass, early in February at the UN Security Council, the high-ranking UN employee revealed the figure of 14,000 civilians already killed by Ukrainian armed forces in Donbass, including old people, babushkas and daddies, children, etc., smashed hospitals, schools, infrastructure, etc. As to the current day situation, I looked through yesterday's report of the OSCE, Organization on Security and Cooperation in Europe. They have a special monitoring mission in Ukraine. And this monitoring mission issues a daily special report sent to Vienna, to the OSCE headquarters. So yesterday's or February 6th report says that there were 85 ceasefire violations in Donbass, in Donetsk area, and 53 violations of ceasefire in Lugansk area in Donbass, and with 2 explosions. But unfortunately, such a huge international organizations like OSCE, in each its report, failed to identify who is the hero, who is the actor, who is culprit for all these violations of ceasefire. The answer is obvious, one and alone: Kyiv, Ukraine. As to violations of other international arrangements, Minsk Accord, it has 13 articles, clear-cut, in a clear-cut language that cannot be, and not necessarily to be interpreted at all, because it's very written in a very simple sentences, understood by even small school children. But Kyiv so far has violated all of them, 13. And Article 10 prohibits to use, for example, for foreigners as instructors, advisors for the Ukrainian armed forces, and to use mercenaries and other actually military gangsters on the other country's soil. As to the OSCE decision made in 1993, the OSCE in that year has issued a decision banning to send any kind of weapon to zones where conflict situations are underway. So it's clearly referred to the situation near Donbass. Yes, what will Russia do? Actually, Russia is not going to attack Ukraine, because we are number one all over the world in terms of territory, in terms of space, land space, and water resources. Ukraine seemingly does not have any idea or desire to attack the Russian Federation or the Republic of Belarus. There are no such intentions, as we understand so far. But at the same time, we noted for sure that there are several thousands Ukrainian armed forces near the Ukrainian Belarusian border, plus Ukrainian-Russian border, facing some northern provinces or oblasts of Ukraine, Chernigov, Kharkov, and Sumskaya oblast or regions. The bulk of this military army units of Ukraine has amassed around Donbass. You were right, Joe, and some other speakers who mentioned this figure, 150,000. This figure was officially announced at the OSCE by Russian permanent representative on the 27th of January. It's in the Russian language, the text is available, but unfortunately only in the Russian language at the website of the Russian permanent mission to the OSCE. So, but what will happen if Ukraine attacks Donbass? Not by sporadic ceasefire violations or using sniper fire, killing civilians, but if Ukraine dares to launch a wide-scale military attack and military aggression against civilians in Donbass, surely Russia will support population of Donbass. Recently, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said the same, that Belarus or Belorussia in old term will also will be on the side of the Russian Federation. Will be on the side of Federation, and we will defend people of Donbass with all our military and economic might, because they are fighters, they are our people, they are our really sisters and brothers. Plenty of them have Russian passports, and more than that, than passports and historic and native relationship, national relationship. One factor is very crucial. The people of Donbass do not want to live under the roof of the Kiev ultra-nationalist regime. They do not want. They have already decided. The same with the people of the Crimean Republic, the Republic of Crimea. They also do not want to live inside the rest of Ukraine. So that factor should be taken by Kiev leaders very seriously and very soberly. What else? I think that I have finished just my remark, except two things. We have recently seen in El País, in Spanian newspaper, just an official reply of the United States of America and NATO to the Russian proposals delivered to them in mid-December last year. We examined this kind of replies, two replies. They have been printed in English. And Russian President Vladimir Putin already gave 3 negative remarks to these two responses of the USA/NATO. And Mr. Lavrov, our foreign minister, did the same. A number of experts, Russian experts, published their own comments and articles criticizing this kind of reply. A bullet point for characterizing the US and NATO reply to Russian proposals on security guarantees. It is guarantees for insecurity of the Russian Federation, the guarantees of danger to the Russian Federation. So I have already contributed a huge article, a rather big one, around 7 pages, 15,000 characters. But unfortunately in Russian, I would try to translate it and to send it to you if you so desire. No problem. As to Cuban Missile Crisis, correct. It's looming. It's like the sword of Damocles over our heads, not because of threats to use nukes against the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. People's Republic of China has nothing to do with the situation in Ukraine or Donbass. But there is a NATO Air Force operation called Baltic Air Policing. 3 Western nuclear powers are engaged in this operation, day in, day out, all year round, from 04. So nearly 18 years it will celebrate from its existence. There are plenty of dual capable aircraft of NATO that can be used to deliver airdropped nuclear bombs by former earlier designs and newly invented design like a B6112, having maximum yield of 50 kilotons, 3 times as much as Hiroshima atomic bomb dropped in 1945. So it's very close to our territory because 4 nations of the Baltic Sea area, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, have offered their military facilities, airfields, to station this dual capable aircraft. And F-35 has been already sent under the guise of the Ukrainian Donbass crisis to these countries. So I will better stop here and give it a chance other people to make their own remarks and to put questions. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and I would eager to respond to any questions you may put just in front of me. Thank you very much. Peace be with your homes, with you. God protects you all.
Thank you, Vladimir.
My pleasure.
I want to urge again people to put questions in the question and answer area so we can ask those questions. There was one in there about the peace treaty that took place. It wasn't a treaty, it was an agreement that took place in 1990. I'm going to put something in the chat from the National Security Archives, US National Security Archives, about that. So you could see, because there is a tendency to shove it off as if it didn't really happen in the United States, and it did. I'll put that in there. The next person that I'm going to introduce is Ajamu Baraka. Ajamu is the organizer of the Black Alliance for Peace, which is a UNAC affiliated organization. He also is on the UNAC Administrative Committee. The Black Alliance for Peace, when it was first formed, I was very excited about it, to have the narrative for peace from the Black community, which has traditionally been much more for peace than any other community in the United States. And that voice was very, very important for our anti-war movement. And since the founding of that organization, it has grown a lot and is a central, important aspect of all anti-war activity today. So I'm really happy to introduce Ajamu Baraka.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe, and for those kind words. And we thank and salute UNAC for having the vision to pull this very important webinar together. As Joe said, we are in fact proud members of UNAC, UNAC being the primary and premier anti-war and, more importantly though, anti-imperialist coalition in the United States of America. We're not going to talk a lot about the BAP's position on Ukraine necessarily. You can please go and check out our positions at blackallianceforpeace.com. We've been fairly consistent on UNAC and on Ukraine and relating Ukraine to the global context. And that's what we will briefly comment on this afternoon. We are, as everyone, gravely concerned that the accelerated drive to militarization and war by the US and its allies, currently represented in the current crisis in Ukraine, threatens the very future of global humanity. As stated in the final declaration of the 4th Canadian US-Mexico Trilateral Peace Conference that we participated in a few years ago, there must be a firm and principled commitment on the part of peace and anti-imperialist organizations that, quote, peace must be based on the principles of non-intervention and full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity, self-determination, and independence of all states, as stipulated in the United Nations Charter and covenants of international law enacted since the Second Imperialist War, known as World War II. Yet the web of global US command structures with over 800 military bases and NATO, the largest military alliance in the world, illegal draconian sanctions, political subversion through coups, undermines national sovereignty and represents a constant threat to international peace and perpetuates a lawless international Hobbesian state of nature. So while it is quite clear how we get to this moment with the situation in Ukraine, the challenge for the anti-war, pro-peace, or more specifically for the anti-imperialist organizations and movements in the United States and Europe is to ground our understanding of the driving force and objective interests responsible for where the international community is at this moment. For the Black Alliance of Peace, we're clear. We say the common enemy is the US, EU, NATO axis of domination. We argue that we must center our analysis within the context of the global class struggle, a struggle sharpened by the ongoing and irreconcilable contradictions of global colonial capitalism. That is important because if we don't identify the real, concrete material forces, we can find ourselves struggling against shadows instead of the real corporal reality of the alliance of states dedicated to advancing their interests to the detriment of everyone else. It is imperialism, we argue. It is imperialism led by the United States that is the culprit. It is parasitic imperialist domination that is the target. Parasitic imperialist domination would be impossible without its core instrument of enforcement and control, state violence. That is why we're discussing Ukraine today. Imperialism is the framework. Today it is Ukraine, tomorrow it might be China. Why? Because the seemingly sudden and spontaneous crisis that emerged with Ukraine, the steady, violent, oppressive, and repressive relations of power between the US and Western capital and the rest of humanity, it continues. So while we are focused on Ukraine as the most immediate danger, the people of Afghanistan are starving. Bombs are still dropping in Yemen. Coups are unfolding in Africa. The US is still pivoting to Asia, and the peoples and nations of Latin America and the Caribbean are still suffocating from the predatory weight of the US hegemon. While we remind ourselves that the full doctrine of full spectrum dominance animates US foreign policies, when we do that, my friends, we will disabuse ourselves of any illusions on what our historic task must be. The drive for dominance has always been fueled by one objective: to position US capitalist interests to be able to more effectively plunder the labor and resources of the peoples and nations of the world. Is that not why we're here? Is that not what is in play in Eastern Europe? Is it not capitalist competition and the geostrategic implications that is driving events? Can't we understand Ukraine, the role of NATO and the US, without understanding the economic interests involved with Nord Stream 2 and the Eurasian Economic Union, and even the Belt and Road Initiative? Was it a surprise that after being pushed out of Afghanistan, a crisis would emerge in Kazakhstan as the US is desperately trying to reposition itself in Central Asia? That is why nothing short of the defeat of imperialism must be seen as our task. So as I close, my friends, let's rededicate ourselves to what we know has to happen. We must build powerful international people's movements. There, in fact, is progress coming from the bottom up, coming from the people. There is a global movement to make the possession and use of nuclear weapons illegal. There's an international treaty that states are signing, but there's pressure coming from the people on states to sign this prohibition against the possession of nuclear weapons. There's growing opposition to NATO. We consider NATO to be a white supremacist structure used as an aggressive force to perpetuate and advance white supremacy. There's a growing understanding that in fact NATO plays that role, and there's growing opposition to it. There is an international campaign that we need to intensify to close US and NATO bases and to shut down the US global command structures. There are the demands on the part of the people to make their regions zones of peace so that nations and peoples can develop in peace without war. There's growing support for the international treaty to ban weapons. There is all of this movement that's happening on the part of the people demanding democracy, human rights, and a prohibition against war and conflict. So my friends, while the white supremacist, colonial capitalist, patriarchal ruling classes of the US and Europe are clear, even if we are not sometimes, their war and repression must be used with maximum efficiency to maintain hegemony. That is their understanding. Therefore, we can have no illusions. We must fight back and we must win. Every mobilization against illegal sanctions, subversion in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, the global US command structures and bases, mass incarceration in the United States, police killings, the murder of Palestinians, and the continued capitalist assault on Mother Earth has to be seen as part of our efforts to defeat the colonial capitalist order, to fight imperialism. And the way we do that is that we turn imperialist wars into wars against imperialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajamu. There's been a question as to whether or not this webinar is being recorded, and the answer is yes, it is. And you could also see the recording, which is live streaming right now on the UNAC's Facebook page, United National Antiwar Coalition, but there'll be a clearer copy that will be put on YouTube probably later today. But if I can process it in time, I will also make sure that it gets in the message that each of you who have registered gets tomorrow, 24 hours after the start of this form. Zoom will send out a message, and I will put in that message, if I can do it in time, the link to the recording of this webinar so you can see it. So our final speaker before questions and answers is Larissa Shessler. Now, Larissa is not an English speaker or very little English, as I understand, but she has written her comments in English. If there is a need, Leonid will do some interpretation, and maybe we'll have to do that for the question period also. So I'm going to turn right now over to Larissa to hear what she has to say. Larissa also is the chair of the Union of Political Immigrants and Political Prisoners of Ukraine and is also now in Russia. Larissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your invitation to participate in webinar. And I understand you, and I can speak English so that I will be in English. Thank you. I represent a community of political immigrants who were forced to leave Ukraine because the nationalists and Russophobes who came to power there. The state putsch in 2014 brought to power ultranationalists and real Nazis who start a war in Donbass. I want to present a situation from the point of view of Ukrainian political immigrants who see the situation inside the Ukraine state and the impact of Ukraine events on relation between Russia and Ukraine. Since 24, Western globalists have tried to use Ukraine as a tool to fight Russia. In the Western media, Ukraine is being portrayed as a freedom-loving, democratic state that totalitarian Russia seeks to take control of, but is a wrong image. In reality, we have total corruption, discrimination of Russian population in the basis of language, impunity of real Nazis, glorifications of Hitler and Ukrainian collaborators Shukhevich and Bandera. All these integral features of the Ukraine regime are cleverly hidden by Western media. However, it was not enough for globalists that Russia was weakened by a hostile neighboring state. They planned to use Ukraine as a territory for hosting NATO military bases, missile launchers threatening Russia, military airfields, and naval bases. The attempt to create an American naval base in Crimea was one of the reasons why Crimea joined Russia. The union of Crimea with Russia was totally supported by Crimean population, which was Russian speaking and Russian cultural. However, the approval and desire of the residents of Crimea did not play the first role in Russia's decision to retake Crimea. The main reason, in this opinion, was the real threat to get a NATO military base in the Black Sea, in Crimea, in backyard of Russia. However, the story of Crimea did not become a lesson from the European and American authorities. On the contrary, in recent years, a real war was unfolded against Russia, designed to deprive it of sovereignty, improve and rights of it to its resource. Unproven occasions of poison of Skripal family, poisoning Navalny, accusations of the death of Malaysian Boeing, condemnations for supporting Lukashenko, Maduro, and Bashar Assad lead to a chain of sanctions and wars in relation with Russia. But the attempt to force Russia to admit these accusations leads to the opposite result. And now Russia is putting up counter demands which are highly rigid and impossible to accomplish. However, we are well aware that this position of Russia is just a response at an attempt to politically withdraw Russia from the circle of geopolitical players. We are all remembers the constant humiliating definition of Soviet Union and Russia, upper volta with missiles, gas station countries, economy is in tatters. This propaganda is intent the present Russia is a poor, very aggressive country that threatens the Baltic states, Georgia, and Ukraine. But we see the West is pumping Ukraine with a huge amount of weapons. It is West that creating naval bases in Ukraine, in Berdyansk, Achakov, and Yuzhny. New bases armed with missiles and are being created in Poland and Romania. We believe that arms supplies to this region multiply the threat of new war, and this war, like the First World War, threatens the all European countries. It is necessary before it's too late to stop this military hit, these constant threats of sanction against Russia, these constant false accusations against it. European governments need to stop imposing these demands on democracy and freedom of speech on other countries. For some reason, regimes like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, and other countries without democratic freedoms, equality of women's rights, and freedom of speech and religions are not condemned by West. So why does not West make these claims to Russia, Cuba, China, North Korea? Weapons on the border of Ukraine and Russia can blow up the whole world, and it needs to be stopped. Thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you, Larissa. It was very well understood. We're going to go into a period of questions and discussion. And I'm going to try to put a gallery view so you'll see everybody that's here. And also, Margaret, feel free to jump in at any point here if you would like to add your comments to any of the questions. And if people want to ask questions, again, put them in question and answers. Some of them which are similar, I will try to put together into a single question, and we'll see where to go. And since this is a conversation, if folks from the Russian-Ukrainian area would like to speak directly or ask a question of those of us in the US and vice versa, please feel free to do that. Larissa addressed the question of Crimea, but this is a question which is highly politicized in the United States and propagandized. The image that the US corporate media puts out is that the people of Crimea don't want to be part of Russia, that the reason they are now part of Russia is that Russia invaded Crimea and took it after the coup, which they don't call a coup, in Kiev. I wonder, especially if any of the Ukrainian and Russian guests have any further thoughts on that, or can say anything more about that, but also for any of us from the US that would like to make a comment on that, especially Bruce, who has been there. Would anybody like to speak about that? Yes, go on, Professor. You're muted, I'm sorry, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, so, okay, thank you. Crimea is immortal, our Russian land. We have taken it after waging 13 wars with Ottoman Turkey. And the last war was in the 18th century. So in 1783, Catherine the Great proclaimed the territory of Crimean Peninsula as a part of Russian Empire. So Crimea just entered the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, the Soviet Union, when it was established. But unfortunately, in 1954, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev voluntarily, without any decision, proper decision, legal decision, gave this Crimean Peninsula with all assets and population without the will of the Crimeans to Ukraine. the act was illegal because the decision was taken not by the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, the federal huge parliament, but the presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, a body with limited authority and functions. In 2014 and before that, when Crimeans have seen that the neo-Nazis have got power in Kiev and the rest of Ukraine, decided better not to live in such a failed country called Ukraine. And at the referendum conducted in the Crimea Peninsula, more than 96% of the Crimeans voted in favor of staying within the Russian Federation. Slightly less figure was recorded in Sevastopol, the huge Russian naval base. But nevertheless, figure were astonishing, and that's why we believe that it is our land. We had a very strong bonds of historic, religious, cultural, and family, people-to-people nature. So this chapter is closed for Ukraine. It is open for us. It is our land, and we will never return it to Kiev, whatever regime will be in the future. The story is over. Thank you very much.
Any other comments on that?
Dear friends, let me translate for Larissa and Shessler for a second.
Leonid, sorry, Leonid. Be so kind. We have not enough time. We have not answered questions. There are too many. Could you please be so kind to interpret whatever I told and other people told later on to Larissa, because she is from your organization. It's not a problem. Be so kind. And I would like to answer a question that could be addressed to me as well, instead of translation.
Okay,
what
go on.
to do to diffuse the situation near Donbass? A, Alpha, in terms of Kiev. Kiev should tear off master plan prepared by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces to conquer Donbass and to kill its inhabitants, to grab only the land. People they don't want to get. Second, Kiev should stop getting military hardware from NATO member states. He should send back all military instructors to Canada, to the United Kingdom, to the United States, to their beloved countries. And Kiev should recognize independence of Donetsk and Donbass, People's Republic, for good, forever. B, or Bravo, as to NATO. NATO should do the same. Stop sending lethal arms to Kiev regime. Stop inciting Kiev to wage huge military warfare against the people of Donbass. NATO should also forget the desire to invite Kiev into NATO ranks, because it will be a mortal threat to the Russian Federation. That is the main reason. Thank you very much. I have replied.
Thank you. Does anybody else on the panel want to answer either of those questions about Crimea? I know, Bruce, you've visited Crimea recently, or about the second question, which was addressed by Professor Kozin.
I'd rather defer to Larissa.
Okay. Leonid, do you have any comment?
Лариса Ильина, вопрос возник по Крыму. Что мы можем сказать? Ну, вкратце.
Я согласна с предыдущим выступающим о том, что Крым никогда не вернется на Украину и что мир должен признать эту ситуацию, потому что Крым был русским и в будущем тоже будет русским.
We are very much agree with the previous speaker, Professor Vladimir Petrovich Kozin, that Crimea will stay in Russia, since at first it is the will of population of Crimea, and it will stay Russian forever, as long as possible to imagine.
Thank you. All right, let's do a follow-up on what Professor Kozin just said. What if the United States does not agree and NATO does not agree to the conditions laid down by Russia, and they push for Ukraine to enter NATO? They refuse to pull back their troops and weapons from the Russian border in a number of areas and continue their aggressive posture. What will be the result? And a follow-up to that is, what if the aim here is really to gain back Donbass? Now, Zelensky has said to the president that he intends to gain back Donbass and intends to gain back Crimea. What if forces actually do go into those areas? What will Russia do? And a third aspect of that is, in the United States, they started floating around this idea of a false flag incident, where they will claim that there will be an incident where Ukrainian troops will fire on Russian troops or go into the Donbass, and or that Russia will claim that this happened, and it will not really happen, but it will be a false flag, meaning that it will create a fake incident for Russia to actually attack. What are your thoughts on those things? And anybody else also jump in here. Who would like to comment on it? Okay, Ajamu, go on.
I think on that first question about what Russia would do or anyone else, I think that question should be, it could be addressed, but I think the main target of that question should be to the movement. What will the movement do? What should be the response from international civil society? This goes beyond just the movements and interests of these various states, but these are activities that threaten global stability and, in fact, global humanity because of their possible consequences. So we need to begin to think in different terms. It's not about this movement seeing itself as sort of in objective terms, but we have to see and understand the potential agency that we have to impact these questions. On the issue of Donbass, it's quite clear that part of the reason why we have the crisis that has intensified is because, and we were tracking this from the very beginning when the Biden administration came into power. By March, it was quite clear that they were agitating the Ukrainian coup government to consider taking back the eastern portion of Ukraine by force. That is, they were encouraging them to attack what was or used to be their own people. The very same condemnation they made against Assad in Syria. But people say, well, it was the independence movement and the Russians that split Ukraine. No, we say it was the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian coup government, and the US that carved off eastern Ukraine by through a process of categorical conversion, they changed their national identity from Ukrainians to pro-Russian separatists, which meant basically anything could be done to them. So the issue with the Ukraine today is the consequence of this naive belief that they're going to be able, Ukrainians are going to be able to take back Eastern Ukraine to squash the independence desire on the part of the people of that territory. We should, as a movement, not get into the weeds necessarily with all of these various issues, from Crimea to even Eastern Ukraine, but to articulate instead the broad concepts and positions we should take as a movement. One, we support the notion of self-determination, that this issue has to be addressed and solved by the people involved in this struggle. That we should reject any role on the part of the US and NATO in this situation. What gives the US and NATO any right to be the final arbiters on this? If this in fact represents a true threat to international peace, it should be shifted then to another body, or the body that's primarily responsible for that, which is the Security Council, okay? Third, we've got to support the notion that the people in that territory, in Eastern Ukraine, have a right to determine their future. So these are some of the I think main issues we have to deal with when we talk about this Ukrainian situation. And I'm not interested myself necessarily in all the drama and intrigue around false flags and all of that. That you know, let's keep this at another higher level of analysis. Over.
Any other discussion on that?
Yeah.
Okay, I see Professor Kozin. Anybody else?
Okay.
Go on, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Joe, thank you very much for your 3 questions or 3 sub-questions. They are true to life and straightforward. And that's why I have to respond also straightforwardly to them. First, if the USA and the rest of NATO will put Russia in a very awkward position in terms of our national security, in response, we will put the United States government, not people, the government, and NATO countries at the same awkward position in terms of their security. Their security will be endangered. We have enough military might and high-tech military capabilities to be in the lead. Second, Donbass. You know, our parliament is, due to coronavirus, is having some rest. It will be in session, the session will be resumed on the 14th of February, in a week time. Before that, the leading ruling party in the State Duma proposed to send necessary military equipment from the Russian Federation to the people of Donbass. And the majority of Russian people, except some minorities like pro-Western people, is in favor of supporting this kind of notion, because Donbass desperately needs a specific types of weapon they do not have so far. Donbass should be recognized when my personal view is immediately if Ukraine starts an all-out war against people of Donbass. We have been waiting for 8 years, 8 long years. I quoted 95 violations in Donetsk yesterday, February 5th. But in the past, the OSCE monitoring mission has recorded thousands of violations of ceasefire in Donbass, but it was not a war. It was a kind of state-sponsored terrorism, a crawling military aggression against the people of Donbass. But if they start to see a huge war like Georgian ex-president Saakashvili launched a huge military aggression against people of South Ossetia using Grad, Russian multiple rocket launching system, one salvo of which can wipe off 20 hectares of land. Everything will be burnt out. So we will recognize the two republics in Donbass, Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic, and offer them any possible moral, political, economic, cultural, financial, any kind of assistance. That's it. But we will never cross the Donbass Russian border initially, being the first. No, we shall wait till Ukraine unleashes this illegitimate fraternal aggression against people of Donbass. I said no, it's not a serendipity when I mentioned people that they are not interested in the people of Donbass. They need territory, land, resources, infrastructure, etc. Peoples, they do not care. So that's it. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on any of that? All right. There was a question as to whether or not the video of this could be used, and yes, it will be put up on YouTube, and we encourage people to broadcast it and to get it out as much as possible. Hopefully we can get it out very broadly, because it is not often that people in the United States hear views that we are hearing here today.
Joe,
yes.
Excuse me, I have forgotten to respond to your third, the last question concerning on the alien flag, on the false flag. Yes, we know, just there are two scenarios already engineered by CIA and Ukrainian national CIA. First, to use chemicals and to stage chemical attack in Donbass. And the second one is to change military attire for the Russian soldiers and create a cluster of people pleading to Kiev, takes us back to our beloved Ukraine. But look, guys, for the last nearly 8 years, 1.5 million people from Donbass left Donbass for other countries and for the rest of Ukraine, for the big Ukraine. Half of them have already returned to Donbass because people were dissatisfied with what is happening in the rest of Ukraine, in the continental Ukraine. Soaring prices, poor pensions and wages, gangsterism in the street, a lot of weaponry, sidearms, illegally going out throughout Ukraine. So, thank you. I stop here.
Thank you. I just want to solidarize UNAC with the position that Ajamu gave also, that UNAC doesn't take positions on what should happen in any country that the US is attacking. That is up for the people of that country to decide. That's called self-determination. We here in the belly of the beast, to use a phrase from Che Guevara, oppose our own government's war efforts. And it should be clear that it is the US government that has been the aggressor in just about every case around the world. We have military in about 172 countries of the world. The US has about 20 times the number of foreign military bases as all other countries in the world combined. And we have seen from Iraq to Syria to Afghanistan to Yemen to coups throughout Latin America, coups throughout Africa, sanctions. We have seen the United States attack one country after another. So the job of our peace movement is to stay the hand of our own government, not to take positions on any other particular government. All right, I think the best thing to do at this point, there are a ton of other questions. There's 74 questions in there. Some of them are combined, some of them aren't questions. First of all, one question from Ann Wright, very important person in our movement. Ann Wright was a former Pentagon official and was actually ambassador to either Mongolia or out of Mongolia, I don't know, but quit her post after the US invaded Iraq and has become a leader of the US anti-war movement after that. Her question was a simple one. She wanted to get some of the chat from the chat, and she tried to ask me to do that, but I can't figure out how to do that, or if there's a way. I used to know how to way, but they've changed a little bit on Zoom lately. But I will get the entire chat and I will put it up as a link somewhere so that if folks would like to see some of that chat, they can link to it. And I will let people know about that. So let me just go in and see if people can give maybe 3-minute summary remarks of what we've heard. It's very clear to me this is the beginning of a discussion, not the end of a discussion. We have to have these discussions more. We have to maintain contacts with each other, and we have to together make sure that there is not a war between these nuclear powers in the world. So there's a lot of questions that are unanswered. But let me just start, go down the line, see if folks can give no more than 3 minutes on summary remarks of what they think. Bruce, would you like to start with that?
Well, I would say the most important thing right now is for people to continue sharing information with our friends, our families, our neighbors as widely as possible, because it's obvious that the demonization of Putin and Russia is thick in the minds of the American people. And we're not going anywhere as a country or as a peace movement unless we deal with that factor. Again, I really strongly suggest the Ukraine on Fire documentary done by executive producer Oliver Stone. It highlights from the beginning to the end of this story very well. We need to get that into the hands of more and more people all the time. We've got to be out on the street regularly. Even a small thing like taking a picture of yourself holding a sign saying no war with Russia and putting it on Facebook. If everybody on this call did that, it would be seen by thousands and thousands of people. And so, you know, there are many, many things that we can all do to move this along. And I also think that everybody needs to start reading more international media. For example, I read Sputnik every day. I've never found it to be an unreliable source of information. You know, I don't rely on US media, Western media at all, because it's virtually all lies. So I think people need to branch out more and read other media from other countries as much as possible. Thank you for this, for coming on here today, folks. Thank you to UNAC for organizing it.
Leonid, would you like to make a closing remark? You need to get, okay.
Yeah, friends, first of all, we need to be very grateful for all this collective effort of our friends who we know from before, and for somebody who we don't know yet, but acquainted. Fortunately, tonight it's night here. I'm sorry, it's day in your time, in your place. Our first wish is to make our meetings like the one of today more or less regular, maybe once in a month. I remember Joy Lombardo once said in meeting of our Red Square Club, which is called abroad also Molotov Club. There is a reason for it. It was a proposal of such name from Finland. But in any case, there was proposal from Joy Lombardo to make educational type of meetings or videos about Ukrainian situation, what it is, because it looks sometimes very strange. Not very many understand what are the roots of the conflict. I might say the roots of today's conflict, which brings the world again to the edge of self-destruction. These roots lay in very old Eastern European feudalism, this deep, believe me. Feudalism, which was in Poland, then it was destroyed by Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then generations after, the Western Ukraine, which was in Poland, Russian province, believe me or not, it was called this way, Russian province in Polish Republic, which was called Rzeczpospolita Polska, Rzeczpospolita. The Western Ukraine, the very Western Ukraine, was called Russian province. The feudalism there was very cruel on peasants. Austro-Hungarian emperor destroyed this system. From that time, they are very grateful to this. Until today, they made statues of him. What was his name? Franz or somebody. And of course, generations after, they opposing all the others, Polacks, and then later Soviet Union. They opposed it. That caused initially their opposition to Russia, although Russian wanted only to be friends. But this is all the matter of educational type of videos which we might produce very soon for you. But not only this. About the coup d'etat in 2014, we can say a lot. Everything happened in front of our eyes there in Kyiv. We remember this as it happened yesterday. And many other things to tell you. Thank you so much, dear friends, for today's opportunity to acquaint with you.
Thank you, Leonid. I don't know if Margaret Flowers is still on because she's been doing a lot of childcare stuff. But Margaret, if you are and you would like to make a comment at the end here, please feel free to join and give us some of your thoughts. You're muted.
Yeah, got it. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to everyone for being on today, the panelists and so many participants. As you know, has been said, this is a really strong beginning, but it is, we still have much more work to do. We need to continue to organize actions and to put pressure on our government to de-escalate and stop this aggression. At popularresistance.org, you can read the call to action. We're posting upcoming actions there. If you have actions, please send them to me at info@popularresistance.org, info@popularresistance.org. I've neglected to mention the online rally that we did yesterday in my opening comments. We had about 200 people that attended that, and that will be posted on YouTube hopefully later today. It is also already on our Facebook page at Popular Resistance. You know, we're united here in our opposition to war and imperialism, and we've got a good, strong start. It's been a short period of time that we came together in this way, and already we're, you know, doing well. So let's up the pressure. Thank you.
Larissa, would you like to make any comment? Are you able to? Leonid, can you help ask her?
Приглашаю сделать комментарий заключительный.
I think, thank you very much. I want to take a little picture. A few days ago in Ukraine, one person was sentenced to 5 years in prison. What is his fault? He put the portraits of Lenin and Stalin in social networks. It is a criminal offense in the Ukraine. I want to show the real face of the Ukrainian authorities. Thank you for your invitation, and I think it's a good beginning. I hope it will be continued. Thank you.
Thank you. Ajamu, do you have any final remarks?
Yes, first, thank you again to UNAC for the vision to pull this together, especially with the vision to include voices and perspectives from the region itself. It's been very, very valuable. For those of us outside of the region, and specifically for those of us in the US, the challenge that we have, as we laid out in our talk, is to continue to build an anti-imperialist movement. As we said, today we are concerned with Ukraine. Tomorrow it's going to be China. We know it's already Iran. We know the people are suffering in Yemen. We know that the coups are expanding in Africa, and that the designs that the US imperialists have on Latin America and the Caribbean are only deepening. So the struggle that we have to wage is a continuous struggle. So we have the responsibility in the US to try to figure out, how do we make this issue of peace an issue that's part of mainstream discourse to the extent that we can? How do we do that? Perhaps maybe we try to figure out how we can inject this into the conversations around the upcoming elections, for example. We need to also, folks, delegitimize NATO. We can't allow NATO to continue to have any kind of prestige in the United States. Don't be afraid of critiquing and demanding for this backward white supremacist militarist anachronism called NATO to be dismantled. You know, that's our position. Those of us who are at the receiving end of NATO, that's our positions. Stand in solidarity with the people of the global South and demand that this structure is swept to the dustbins of history. Connect the issues, folks. Stay involved. Be ready for the next mobilizations, because they're coming, because these folks are desperate and they're committed to violence to maintain their global hegemony. Please get more information, follow and join UNAC if you're so inclined. If you are inclined also, please go to the website of the Black Alliance for Peace. We follow all of these issues and provide up-to-date information on issues from across the planet. Another source of timely information, of course, is Popular Resistance. Please check out that website. And of course, some of us on this call are also editors and writers for another cutting edge publication, the Black Agenda Report. So go to blackagendareport.com to get the latest perspectives, information from a radical and Black revolutionary perspective. Thank you so much, and thank everybody for attending.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. Thank everybody for attending and thank our speakers. I'd also urge you, as Ajamu said, to go to unacpeace.org, which is our website, And there is a join there. Your organization can join UNAC. That's with unity that we can do everything that we need to do. We developed a unity within 1 week to put out demonstrations in more than 40 cities, as Margaret said. Yesterday, there was demonstrations in more than 40 cities, but you didn't see a word of it in the US media. If 20 people come out in Venezuela against the government, it will be all over the front pages, but you don't see anything here. So we have to stay together. We have to continue to work together, and we have to make more connections with our folks and our friends overseas. As Ajamu said, we have to end NATO. NATO is going to have another meeting in June in Madrid. I will be there to protest along with others. I invite our Ukrainian and Russian friends to join us, to come on the platform against NATO with countries all around the world, especially European countries that are fighting against NATO in their own countries. In the United States, we hope to do demonstrations for those that can't go because we don't know how the COVID virus will affect these meetings. But we will have these demonstrations as NATO meets in Madrid. You might remember when NATO was in Chicago in 2012, we held the largest demonstration against NATO that has happened anywhere ever that year, which UNAC played a leadership role in organizing. So I see Professor Kozin's hand up. I'm going to allow him to have the last word, and then we're going to log off.
Yes, because I have also used just a couple of minutes. Well, first of all, I'm very much impressed what Margaret Flowers told us. It's tremendous figures testifying the activism and dedication of rank and file Americans and other people of other states and other nations. So I wish I could be with you, my dear friends, but problems with the coronavirus, COVID-19, you see, still prevents us to sit together, you see, tete-a-tete. As I would ready to sign any kind of petition urging US senators and House representatives official and namely President of the United States, Mr. Joseph Biden, to stop inciting Kiev regime to conquer Donbass and to kill more and more innocent civilians there. I would also sign any kind of petition urging the UN Security Council that will be in session very soon. As I remember, on the 17th or 18th of February, it depends on the time, Moscow or Eastern Pacific time, also to stop this kind of building up of weapons, arms and ammunition to be used against armless people. They do not deserve it. And I'm also very grateful for Joe, for other speakers, for very profound thoughts and suggestions and proposals to intensify our struggle against wars, against potential use of nuclear weapons, and for potential militarization of outer space that has already started. Well, thank you very much indeed. God bless you all. Take care and try to keep strong militarily in a good, positive way of this, and emotionally and physically and mentally. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all. Stay strong. Keep up the fight. We can win a world of peace if we all do it together. Thank you. And thanks to the speakers. I'll talk to you all again soon. Goodbye.
No compromise, no retreat. We will win.
Yes, right.
And Leonid, I'll talk to you again soon too. Take care. Thank you very much for
Leonid.
all your
No
work on
delays
this.
to find new ways. No
That's right.
delays to find new ways.
That's right. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.